Yay! Hello, everybody who's watching, and hello, Keith. We're very excited. This is our Dungeon Master deep dive for D&D in a Castle, and we have with us Mr. Keith Baker, none other than the creator of Eberron and many other things, and longtime Dungeon Master. And we're very excited to have you here and to have you coming back to the castle this spring. So welcome, Keith.
Yay.
Yay!
I'm excited too after seeing that opening. I mean, that's a hell of a clip. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, our whole philosophy is FOMO, because everybody wants to be at the castle, and that video really leans into that for sure.
As they should. It's incredible. I had a
Wonderful.
fantastic time this year.
So speaking of, you came to the castle for the first time this spring. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, that was my timelines are sometimes difficult to follow. But yes, this spring you were there for a round of D&D in a castle, which you played for. Did you have a full table of 6? You had 6 guests?
Yes, I did.
So what tell us how you came to D&D in a castle and what you felt the experience was like.
Well, D&D in a Castle is something I've always been interested in and was talking about just before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit, and I just hid on Zoom for the next couple of years. So I was super excited to get back in touch once everything sort of settled down. Um, I I just feel like it's exciting to be in a space that helps fire the imagination. And also, one of the things I love compared to running games at a convention is when I'm running games at a convention, I'm usually doing one shots.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can do there. Whereas to me, a D&D campaign really shines when you're sort of, 3 or 4 sessions in and people have really gotten to know the characters and the world, and so being able to basically run 24 hours of gaming in a short period of time, you really get a sort of intense story experience that is completely different from just, playing a game at a con. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed the experience I had with the group because by the end of it, we really knew these characters. We really, it felt like the end of a season of television, not just watching an episode.
Right. Have you played in that sort of format before? Like, multiple days, all day, kind of in a space. Is that something that you've done before?
I'm not sure I have. I've played, sort of intense campaigns and such, and I've certainly been to a lot of conventions. One of my favorite conventions is in Portland, Oregon, called Ampercon Northwest, and that is pure gaming Thursday night to Sunday afternoon. But it's not one story. You're playing each slot, you're playing a different RPG. And so, as I said, I've had that, I'm going to go play, 72 hours of gaming, but not that experience of we're just, playing 8 hours and then tomorrow we're coming back and doing it again with the same characters and story. And it really fits the style, the way I like to run games really is about I want to tune the story to the players and to their characters. I want to build the story around the characters. And so having again that time for us to get to know them, for hooks to come out, for the idea, the seeds that we planted during session 0 to actually happen, is something, as I said, that's really exciting and that I can't do in a 4-hour session at a convention.
Mhm. Yeah, I've also been told by a number of people that one of the things that's different about this format from either, a one shot, which as you say is a lot shorter, or even compared to a home game that, happens week after week, is that you don't
Right,
lose any time with catch up because whatever just
right,
happened literally just happened. Like there's not
right.
like a Narnia thing where you go back in and out. Like
No.
whatever is in
And
real time is happening.
right, and that's the thing is it's essentially for me, it's as if it was 6 sessions of a campaign. And so I have a campaign on my Patreon I've been running for a couple of years, and the point there is I run 1 game a month. So, I mean, it's just like, boom, that's half a year of gaming condensed into 1 weekend, you know? And even when I'm playing with friends at home, it's hard even to do a weekly game. So often it's like every other weekend again, then you're getting a month and a half again, and it's intense. Everyone remembers exactly. You don't have that. It was 2 weeks ago. What were we doing again? So yeah, I completely agree. And so it's just an experience that's very different than you're going to get either at a con for sure, or with a home game, because you just really get this deep dive
Mhm. Yeah.
working in the name of the talk here.
It is well, D&D the Castle, it is a deep dive into your campaign for sure, and you definitely go down and don't come back up for air till you're done in a way.
Right.
It's pretty
Now,
intensive, but nobody has too
I
much
mean,
to eat. Like, that's not a thing. Nobody's drowning. They're all
yeah,
quite
having said that, just for the people who might be tuning in who aren't familiar with it, it's not quite as intense. There is the hardcore mode, and that's its own thing. But the point is, it's 8 hours a day. And so that's a lot of D&D, but you're still getting time to enjoy the beauty of the castle, to wander into, Newcastle or things like that. Like, it's not like, why go to the castle when you're just going to spend the entire time around a table? You definitely get time to enjoy the rest of the experience.
yeah, yeah. And so you're coming back in the spring. Um, I think you're in the April round. So
Mhm.
well, March 30th to April 3rd. And so, what are you thinking about doing for the campaign for that event?
So, like I said, I really like to build my campaign around the players and their characters. And so I will do what I did this year, which was I offered the players a choice. And so once I had the players, knew who people were, I offered them the choice of I have for the last few years been working on Frontiers of Eberron, which is a sort of focused part of Eberron, set in the town of Quickstone, and it's a bit of a sort of fantasy western. And then so what I told people is, well, you can get in on the ground floor and get a frontiers adventure, or I could make something entirely new that's sort of set at a castle, basically playing to the location. Like, do you want something that's your adventurers have all been summoned to this castle? And if they had gone that route, like I would have done more with the use of the space or something like that. As it was, they all wanted to do Quickstone, which I loved, and it was a chance for everyone to get in on the thing I was running. But it was kind of funny because it meant that all the players who chose to costume for my game were in more of a sort of fantasy western vibe. So we were very sort of our own look compared to the rest of the people. Um, and like I said, I expect to do that same thing and to offer the players 2 or 3 choices. I, of course, found it very funny that, here we are coming to this beautiful castle in England, playing a campaign set in a, small mining town in a dusty, prairie, but that was the choice people made, so there you go.
There you go. And I imagine that no matter what adventure you're running at the castle, it's going to be in Eberron. Is that a given?
Yeah, I think that, that would be the plan. The only reason I would do something different is because I have a new setting of my own that I've been thinking about. And if that's far enough along, I will offer people a chance to play that. And then again, part of the point is it's an opportunity to play test something that no one else will see for a year or two.
Mhm.
So that's going to be, that's a possibility, but depending how other things have gone, I'm not sure that's going to be in a sort of state where I'm ready to do that. Otherwise, yeah, it'll absolutely be Eberron because that's the point. I can give people part of what I like, whether it's a convention or something like this, is being able to sort of give people a chance to have an adventure in Eberron that they likely wouldn't have
Mhm.
just at their table at home,
Yeah.
and the opportunity to sort of experience, the things I feel like you should know or see or experience.
Do you
So,
get
but I will.
did you get from your players a lot of questions about the setting? since they got the
A
opportunity?
little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the interesting thing was also the range of players, in the game. I definitely had a couple who were longtime Eberron fans. I had a couple who knew it, a little, knew who I was, but, weren't super familiar with it, and I had at least one player who had never played Eberron before. So, it's I aim for to support both. If you are an Eberron fan, I want to dig into something and like give you some little sort of deep dives and Easter eggs that you won't get sort of typically. But on the other hand, for a player who doesn't know the saying at all, I want to make sure that they get to sort of experience it and be drawn in, and there's no expectation that you have to know things to enjoy it. And part of the point is I work with the players, again, once we decided. So I'll just say, with this last campaign, we decided it was going to be in Quickstone, and so we basically did session 0 in advance online. So I talked with everyone, I gave them information about the town, the story, the setting, and we talked about all their characters. So at the end of when we started, one of the characters, well, that was my cat. One of the characters was the sheriff of the town. One of the characters was the blacksmith in the town. We sort of came up like everybody had connections. And that is part of what I like to do again, is because it's this 24-hour session and we really get to dig into characters. I want to make sure everyone has, you're not just a dwarf fighter. You're the town blacksmith and you're out here because you were exiled from your clan, and maybe that's going to come up. Like, I like having stories. I really look at it, like I said, as it's sort of like having a season of a TV show, and you want to have an idea from the very beginning. What are some hooks we've got to play with? What are things that I can pull in? So yeah, I don't even remember the question, but
Just
there you go.
and I also cut you off as you were about to say something else. So if you remember what you were about to say,
Mm,
yeah, I was just
I
asking about
know, no.
the opportunity to get to play with the creator of a beloved setting like that. And I've seen some recent comments online about how Eberron compares to some of the other settings and how people really love this setting. So people generally know you as a creator. I mean, they probably know you
Mm,
from cons and things like that as
yep.
well, but as a writer and a creator, what are you like as a dungeon master?
So the big thing to me is that what I enjoy most about role-playing games is the collaborative element. That basically, when you are watching a movie or a television show or reading a book, it's passive, it's one-sided. And what I love about the D&D experience is you get to make choices, you get to influence the story. And one of the things about that is I do tend to draw on the players to add details to a scene or to the story. As I said, session 0, the first thing I want is to help you develop interesting hooks for your character that I will then work into the long-term story. So I'm not just slapping a story onto you. I want you to help me lay the pieces, so that as it develops, there are things that will really resonate with each player. The other thing, this is a small thing, but I feel it is a key part of my style, is again to ask the players to add details to certain things. If you run into a mob of zombies, I'm going to say, oh, okay, there's some kind of outbreak in this village. You can see that they're farmers. There's a butcher who's missing an arm. But actually, I want each of you to describe one of the zombies that catches your eye. And so I want each player to say like, "Oh, one's a really old woman with a broken, leg, but she's still managing to pull herself forward," and thinking of times I've done this, one guy was like, "Oh, there was clearly a carnival nearby because this guy is some kinda clown." And the point of that is I don't just want to, have that combat be a bunch of numbers versus a bunch of numbers. I want everybody to picture it in their head, and by asking you to describe one of those zombies to me, I'm getting you to stop and think about it and create your own picture of the scene. And then meanwhile, I've got all these 4 characters you just came up with that I can work into my descriptions of the battle. And likewise, this is a small thing. It wasn't this campaign, but it was a different one, but it's a good example. if our campaign is going to be based in this small town. I did one where I started by saying there's only one tavern in the town. It's called the Cat and Biscuit. Everybody, tell me one thing about it. And I went around the table, and one guy says, "Oh, they have an open mic night, and it's got great acoustics." One guy says they brew their own beer, and it's fantastic. One guy talks about the biscuits that they make, and there's always a smell of warm biscuits. And the last player says they don't have a working toilet, and it smells terrible. And everybody was like, "Why? Why did you do that to our perfect little thing?" And I said, "Well, this is Eberron. You can get a cleansing stone, which is basically a magical toilet, for 200 gold pieces." And so for the first three adventures, their main goal was getting enough money to buy a toilet for the inn.
The tavern.
And the point of that is, like I said, that was a story that they all cared about. And like it was the third session, and someone was like, "I know there's some kind of cult operating in town, and I'm glad we're stopping that. But I love that our main concern is getting a new toilet."
Have you?
And hmm?
Do you find that like get make takes people off track or deviates from it, or do you just love to lead into that
Well,
stuff to run the shop? You know.
that's the challenge, and that's the challenge of doing this kind of sandboxy storytelling. Is what you want is to ask questions that uh, keep people on the path, even while giving them elements to add details. In the case of the zombie example, it's a mob of zombies. It's gonna be a mob of zombies, whatever you say,
Yeah.
but add me a detail about it. In the case of the inn, it's gonna be an inn. There's one inn in town, you know. And the toilet example, they could have all said, "I offered. I said it's gonna be 200 gold pieces to buy a toilet," and they were like, "Okay, we're in." I could have just not offered that if I didn't want Toilet Quest to be part of the story. And so, to me, the point of this kind of play is you obviously, there's no point in asking players questions if you aren't going to go with what they want. You want flexibility. You want players to feel they're steering the story, but you also want a compelling story. Basically, you want the story to be compelling enough that the players want to stay on that path, rather than completely going off the rails. So yeah, I definitely don't want to force players to go down the path of the story I had planned, but that just means it's a challenge to me and make the story compelling enough that they want to go down the path.
Yeah, we have a comment here, and just a note: if you want to ask a question of me or of Keith about
Mhm.
Eberron, about Keith, about him as a DM, about his campaign in spring, about D&D in the Castle, just pop your questions in the comments while we're here. I've got so NPCs have their own lives and are not one-dimensional. Great to relate to when you negotiate or slaughter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another thing, this is why I like campaigns over one shots. When I'm doing like the campaign, like I did here, basically again, we said we're in this town, everyone sort of got their role in the town. And another thing I did was I asked each of the players in the session zero ahead of time, I said, "Tell me about someone your character knows in town." This
Right.
could be a rival, it could be a relative, it could be a friend, but tell me about someone in the town. And back to your earlier point, what I would do there is yes and. The point is someone says, "Oh, again, I want to have a fortune teller or something." I might then say, "Oh, and perhaps, do you think they could be a harpy from Kazakh I'll add details and fit it into the story, but on the other hand, "Oh, fortune teller. I wouldn't have planned to use a fortune teller if they hadn't brought that up. And now we're going to have a fortune teller in the mix." The point there again is rather than me just dropping this cast of NPCs, it's saying, "I want you to help me flesh out the cast so then I know I have this rival. I've got your Gaston, or I've got your old father, or, whatever in the game. We had, someone had a young ward, and that played an important part of the thing. So that is the thing to me is it's not just to make NPCs sort of deeper, it's to give the players a reason to care.
Right.
And part of that is by leaning on them to at least develop a few details.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find at D&D in the Castle, people are really motivated, and they spend a lot.
Yeah.
They're very invested players.
Yeah.
But in the story, that's such an important thing for them to have their motivations.
But that is a point coming back to my basic GM style, is as you
Mhm.
were saying, is I am certainly a GM. I know people have, their specialties. Elisa Teague, a longtime D&D in a Castle DM, is, an expert on like puzzles. And she's always going to, you're going to get some pretty compelling puzzles when you're in there. My focus is definitely on the story, that I really want to draw the players into the location, into their relationships with other characters in the world. And yes, you're going to have combat. Yes, you're going to have puzzles and challenges to overcome. I think the point to me is I am focused. You're going to have all those mechanical challenges to face, but what is really important to me is giving players interesting decisions to make. I want you, and this is part of Eberron. Eberron is a place where we've always said it's shades of gray instead of just clear cut good and evil. And I always want the players to have moments that they're going to have to stop and think and like, what is the right path to take here? Just because that's what always interests me in stories.
Mhm. How did you get into D&D in the first place, Keith? What's your backstory?
My backstory: I was bitten by a radioactive mimic when I
Dragon,
was a
great
child.
Legend Dragon.
Uh,
No, Dungeon Master.
this hat actually isn't a hat. It's actually bit me, and I can't take it off. It's a mimic that tells stories. Um, but actually, I was probably 8 or 9 when I first got the white box and the hardcover AD&D books. And at the time, it was probably 4 years before I actually played. But I just loved like the monster manual. Just like reading the monster manual was just so cool. And so then probably around 4th or 5th grade, I actually ran my first game, and part of it again is I like storytelling, uh, but I love that when I'm doing a D&D game, I don't know how the story's gonna end, I don't know what's gonna happen because it's all gonna depend on the choices the players make. I think a key point of this is I have one adventure I've now run like 61 times, and I still love running it because there's enough flexibility and choices in it that something new happens every time. And so I just loved, I was mainly the game master. I was always starting the story. I was always creating the core of the story. And by the time I was about 14 or 15, I basically said, I'm holding a book in my hand. Someone wrote that book. That means that's a job. That is a thing people can do. And I don't know how you get that job, but I'm going to try. And here I am.
Wow. And what was the inspiration for Eberron? How did you come to make that world? Was it
So Eberron basically in 2003, I think, um, Wizards of the Coast did what was called the Fantasy Setting Search. They had acquired Dungeons and Dragons from TSR, and they basically said, "Well, we've inherited all of the old settings, but we want something new." And basically anybody could send in a one-page description of an interesting world, and they got 12,000 entries. They narrowed them down to 10, and everyone wrote 10 pages about their world. They narrowed those down to 3, and everyone wrote 100 pages. You sort of went on through it. And for me, the inspiration of Eberron, I had actually previously been working on MMORPGs. I've also done a lot of video game design, and I had been working for a couple years on a pulp-themed MMORPG, sort of Tomb Raider, Uncharted, that kind of flavor. And so I've been watching a lot of pulp serials, and I have always liked noir, Maltese Falcon, Big Sleep, things like that. And one of the things about third edition when I made it was that the rules of magic were very concrete and very sort of repeatable and scientific. And my brain just said, if magic was this concrete and reliable, why would you not see it evolve as science evolves in our world? Which basically, if we said that in the Renaissance, instead of our principles of physics and technology, we had arcane magic like it exists in D&D, what's the world look like 300 years later?
Right.
And part of it was just because the established settings, the time, Forgotten Realms and such, tended to have wizards in the sort of Lord of the Rings style, these isolated, amazing people in their towers. And I was just saying, but what if it wasn't? What if magic is just a tool of everyday life? Because that's sort of how it feels it should be. So blending all that together, the description of Eberron was Lord of the Rings meets Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Maltese Falcon in a world where magic is part of everyday life.
Cool. And you've just come out, you just referenced it a little while ago, a new book, sort of a
That's true.
tell us a little. I mean, you've been talking about the game you
Mhm.
ran in this
Yeah.
this setting.
So,
Tell us about
so Yeah, so it's called Frontiers of Eberron Quickstone, and the point is that most Eberron books have covered really large areas, nations, continents, and beyond that, the most iconic part of Eberron, which has received, there's two pieces of Eberron that have received like most adventures deal with one of these or the other, and that's either Sharn, the City of Towers, which is basically Eberron's answer to New York City, or the Mournland, which is sort of blasted, crazy, magical wasteland. And I wanted to offer a starting point in a different place that gave a different flavor. And basically, as I said, fantasy western was the vibe. And part of it is just what I've described all along. What I love is taking basically the group of players and saying, we're starting in a small town. Tell me why you're there. Tell me why you care about this town. And then as the adventure unfolds, it's going to affect the town. The town will grow or prosper or fail, based on the actions that you take. Can you get a toilet for the inn? And so part of it is rather than just being, oh, we meet in a tavern and we wander around the world, I'm saying let's actually make a home
that.
and let's have that home grow with you. And so that's what Frontiers is basically about is as I said, bringing some of the sort of classic Western elements into the mix of Eberron's pulp and noir and magic. So you have wand slingers fighting arcane duels. The other interesting point about it is it's a frontier on the edge of a new rising nation of creatures traditionally thought of as monsters. And so, because you're on the border there, this allows you to play harpies, medusas, gargoyles, wargs. And we had, what did we have? We had a harpy bard in my campaign that I ran at the campaign of the blacksmith, I think was a hobgoblin. Um, and so, like I said, it's back to that. I like making a story that you're not likely to get anywhere else, so we're in Deadwood essentially, except that the sheriff is a gargoyle, and as I said, the bard, the bard is an
Part of the
harpy.
Harvey.
Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, I will say we had a very fantastic tense showdown at high noon with wands in the campaign I ran.
Love me some Medusa, says one of our commenters here in the.
I love Medusas, the Medusas we have in Frontiers. I've had a bunch of good Medusa characters.
Are you, when you're dungeon mastering, do you like to bring in a lot of maps and minis and things, or do you like to tend to leave things more in the imagination?
I'm I'm more theater of the mind because, of course, these days I run a lot of things over Zoom and such, and I just don't really do VTTs that much. You could say I'm lazy. I would like to say I'm just leaving it the imagination. When I'm running a castle, yes, I do bring maps and minis, at least to work as a foundation, especially when you get into, you know, uh, interesting combat is a part of D&D to me, that it is the I'm very story forward and story focused, but if you're playing D&D, you want to play D&D, and so I'm gonna work, as I said, I'll take that zombie encounter and I'll get you to add some cool details and I'll make it flavorful, but I'm still gonna try and create a challenging, interesting fight involving some zombies. So as I say, casually, like when I run my Patreon game, which I do every month, and the whole thing there is anybody who's a patron can apply to play in a session. That I just do theater of the mind. But when I am playing in person, then yeah, I do use. I'm not as I gotta say, I may change this up next year. I wasn't prepared when I came to the castle in April of this year. I wasn't prepared for all the amazing, terrain and props and things like that you all were providing. There's this amazing library of miniatures and things like that, and so I'll certainly keep that in mind. For the next session. So you may see more of that if you play with me next year.
Very cool. So we're reaching the end of our time. I'm going to invite you, Keith, to take us out. Lead us into our outro video for the purposes of developing FOMO and making everybody want to come and play at D&D the Castle. But I'm going to ask you to invite all the viewers to come and join you in your game March 30th to April 3rd at D&D in the Castle in the UK next year.
Well, absolutely. As the info was right there, so you had a chance to see it. But I had just a wonderful experience at the castle last time. I loved the story that we as the players are build, and I am really looking forward to another round and getting again to build a really unique story with whoever ends up at my table and coming up with something compelling together and hopefully giving you an experience in Eberron you won't get anywhere else.
Wonderful. We look forward to getting to hang out at the castle together and hopefully hang out with some of you who are watching. So thanks everybody for being here. It was lovely to chat with you, Keith, and we'll see you all at the castle. Take care.
All right. Take care.